Again, why am I reviewing a 4-year-old movie? You'll see very soon. Taken 2 is directed by Olivier Megaton, written by Luc Besson and Robert Mark Kamen, and stars Liam Neeson, Maggie Grace, Famke Janssen, and Rage Sherbedgia. And in Taken 2, the family members of the human traffickers that Bryan Mills killed in the last movie track him down to Istanbul, where he's vacationing with his daughter and his ex-wife. And then people get kidnapped and we have our movie. And I heard just a lot of bad stuff going into this movie, including this continuous reference to someone throwing grenades off a roof. So I was pretty curious, but at the same time I was just expecting the worst, because these action sequels usually don't go very well. And I will say that this movie isn't as bad as I was expecting it to be, mostly because of Liam Neeson. But the editing is just unbelievably horrible, the direction is just awful, it's still a really bad movie. Now, even on a visual level, Taken 2 is just really bland and really generic. At least the first Taken had kind of a disturbing side to it when it would show us how the human traffickers treated their women, but this makes everything kind of black and gray and looking like an overly serious music video. It does that thing in the "you wouldn't steal a car" anti-piracy ads where like everything goes really sepia and like the camera work is just really shaky. Like it keeps doing that throughout the movie. I mean, there's just such a lack of effort on the part of like the visuals people here. Like, I mean, they don't even go all the way with the makeup. In the first movie, like the injury makeup was believable, and here you don't actually get to see a lot of blood and stuff. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing because I want to see violence, but it's because you don't buy the fact that these people are actually getting hurt. And the explosions in this movie are just rendered in just painfully obvious CGI. Add to that some really choppy audio, like some of the audio here gets this weird echoey effect that I know is not intentional because like the next line, the audio is just fine. And a musical score from Nathaniel Mekali, which is just super uninspired and really annoying. Like it tries to make these certain moments feel tense, but they are not actually tense, so the music just ends up again feeling overly serious and kind of laughable. And then we get to the film editing in this movie by Camille Delamar and Vincent Tabailon, and it's some of the worst film editing I've ever seen. I swear, I'm not exaggerating. Like, even just normal conversation scenes in this movie have so many cuts in them that they end up looking like really laughably urgent, even if they're just talking about like family stuff. And I'm not gonna lie, for like the first 30 minutes of this movie, it was decent, you know? Like the first Taken took a long time as well to build up to the action, same thing here. But then as soon as you get to the action, everything just flies out the window. The fight scenes in this movie are just legitimately incomprehensible. I dare you to watch the fight scenes in Taken 2 and tell me how many hits landed, like who was hitting who, because it's really, you can't understand what's going on. And when you get like a really quick wide shot and you see people just kind of standing around, they're not like in any action stances or anything, they're literally just standing there stiff, throwing punches, and it just doesn't look nice. And the editing for the car chases actually made my head hurt. I saw this on TV once and I had to change the channel because it was just making my head hurt because I didn't know what was going on. There were so many close-up shots of like the steering wheel and stuff. And again, I won't lie, the plot does start out promising because we get, you know, the point of view of these villains who are related to the ones who died in the first movie, and they're swearing revenge and all that stuff. And I was thinking, okay, good, we're gonna have some, you know, more fleshed out villains in this movie. But we don't. Like, eventually they end up being even like less interesting than the villains in the first movie. And again, it's giving such a bad rap to Albanians. Like every single Albanian in this movie is just really evil. At first they kind of begin to acknowledge that Bryan, you know, did some really evil things back in the past and in the first movie, but again they drop that character element and they just go back to, you know, not really caring about who he hurts, or, you know, him telling his daughter to set grenades off in the city, which is not something you should do. So much of this movie is dedicated to Bryan training Kim to be a badass and just does not work. I mean, why are we watching this kind of stuff? Like, we are here for Liam Neeson, and most of the movie is, you know, him teaching Kim how to be, you know, how to drive a car. Lenore has a bigger role in this movie, but she's ultimately reduced to like a damsel in distress, so she actually has less, again, a less interesting role than she did in the first movie. And probably the biggest issue in this movie narrative-wise is that Bryan is not hunting down people in this movie. He is actually the one on the run, which again takes what was so cool about the first movie, just this father, you know, going through hell and back just to get his daughter, and it ditches that idea. Instead, he's on the run and it becomes like a generic kind of action movie. Also have to bring up this one thing that they keep doing where, you know, again, they try to give us an insight into how Bryan thinks and like him piecing things together, but whenever they do it, like it either makes zero sense whatsoever or when he's like seeing like his memories in his mind, like he's narrating them out loud, so it's not clever anyway. And in terms of acting, most of the actors playing Albanians in this movie really are just stuntmen, so it's okay if they're not, you know, the best actors. But Raid Sherbegia just is not threatening as a villain in the slightest. He's not intimidating physically even, and he just doesn't seem committed delivering his lines. He's a very, very weak villain. And Olivier Megaton just has no idea how to direct action. Like, it becomes painfully clear during fight scenes that the choreography is just atrocious, and the actors don't seem to know where to stand, so the blocking is all off, and he attempts that overly serious tone again that was in the first Taken, but without any of the darkness that accompanied that movie, so he doesn't earn it here. But like I said, this movie is not as bad as I thought it was going to be, mainly because Liam Neeson still has a bit left in him. Like, he's still good in the action scenes, even if the action scenes are terribly filmed, and he manages to pull off that aw shucks persona that Bryan has at the beginning. And Famke Janssen is still good. She just has nothing to do in this movie, but you can tell she's trying, and I actually thought Maggie Grace in this movie was less annoying than she was in the first movie. I mean, she's not a badass or anything, but I didn't want her to suddenly turn into Gina Carano or anything, so I was fine with her level of kind of like naivety. But in the end, Taken 2 is still a really bad movie. I would not recommend it to anybody, especially if you like the first one. Just, you know, preserve the quality of that movie and don't watch any of the sequels. Alright, so those are my thoughts on Taken 2. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.